Welcome back to another episode of Learning with IPV Dre. So I decided to swap out my camera because the video that I uploaded yesterday was it was good. The video quality was good, but I didn't really like the camera because it looked very blue. It had like a blue hue to it. I was using a Logitech streaming camera, and it was okay. It's okay for, to turn on a quick stream, or, I guess it was the lighting. Maybe my lighting was off. Also have like blue LED lights all over the place, so maybe that's why it was kind of blue. But I'm using a different camera, and I love the hue of this camera. It makes my skin pop, right? So we are on episode 2, right? And today we are going to be talking about Active Directory. We're going to be installing Active Directory. I did some homework yesterday, took a few notes so that I could provide more quality content, right? Also, another thing, I feel like it's important to have good quality, good camera quality, because the screen quality, as you can see, for the Active Directory stuff, the Windows stuff, doesn't really look all that great. So as I told you before, I'm working on a streaming format, getting comfortable with this format of video creation, because usually I just press the start button and just start talking. But I want to create more of a candid, impromptu vibe to this content that I'm creating, and create more of a learning environment, right? So enough of that. Enough all of the production talk. I am going to be talking about, and we are going to be learning how to install Active Directory. We're going to be really emphasizing some of the important concepts of the CompTIA A+, namely DNS, DHCP. You should know at a very basic level what DNS is, what it does, DHCP, what it does, and how to navigate the Windows operating system, right? The last episode, we went over some basic Windows stuff, like how to install Windows Server 2019. We briefly went over how to install Windows 10. Installing Windows 10 in a lab environment is pretty straightforward in comparison to everything else, right? It's similar to how we installed Server 2019, and we did this all in the VirtualBox hypervisor, right? The Type 2 hypervisor, right? So yeah, let's get into it. So I got some notes here as usual. I did a little homework because I didn't really spend much time. I don't know about you, but I didn't really spend much time thinking about Active Directory, what it is, what it does, at a very functional level. I know Active Directory is something that employers want us all to know. When we get into the entry level, I know that we can reset passwords, create user accounts with Active Directory, but I think Active Directory is so much more than that, right? So what is Active Directory? According to comparatech.com, Active Directory is a directory service or container which stores data objects on your local network environment. The service records data on users, devices, applications, groups, and devices in a hierarchical structure, right? So Active Directory is essentially a container that holds all of the enterprise's resources, or a specific subset of an enterprise's resources. And it's a way to centralize everything. Because if you think about it, if you have a big enterprise, or even a medium or small enterprise, small business, and you have multiple users and devices and resources on a network, you want a way to access that information from a centralized location, such as a server, right? And that's why Windows Server exists, and that's why servers period exists, right? It'd be really inconvenient if the resources of an enterprise is distributed on local machines. It would be very hard to get a lot done that way, to access the resources that way. Imagine not having a centralized server that you can log into and really access a lot of the material, right? You'd have to go maybe from building to building to get access to the hardware that's storing a particular resource, right? That doesn't make much sense. So essentially, Active Directory is a database of everything on your network that's attached to it. It's great. Now, what does Active Directory do? What is its function, right? Active Directory corrals everything and puts it into one location. See, that's what I mentioned before. You want everything to be in a centralized location so that you can have access to it in a convenient manner. So it makes it easier for enterprises to manage their resources. For example, login credentials are centralized. That's a very important thing too. With Active Directory, you want to be able to log in from any physical location in that enterprise, right? So when you have an Active Directory account as an employee, you can log in from pretty much anywhere in the building or anywhere in the company on a device that is joined to a domain, right? And this is where the fun networking part comes into play. The device that's joining the domain has to be on the same subnet as the server, or at least it has to be on a subnet that has access to a default gateway, a router that knows how to access that domain controller, right? This is where the CCNA and Network Plus and all that stuff comes into play. And this is why I'm kind of like enjoying Active Directory now, because before I was just not really too crazy about it, right? So let's switch back here because I don't want to, bore you with that screen. So, for example, login credentials are centralized. Therefore, we don't have to have a headache of having to go to each individual's user system to change credentials if need be. We can change the credentials of many systems from one location, right? So, say you're an IT personnel and somebody needs their password changed. You don't want to go to that user system and have to log into their computer or try to change their credentials from that computer, right? You have to go to every system to reset the password. You can just reset it from a centralized location, such as a server that's running Active Directory, right? Here's another question. What is a domain? An Active Directory domain is a group of objects within the Active Directory network. For example, a user, a group of users, devices, etc. So you can have a domain within the Active Directory network, right? And also you can have multiple domains in an Active Directory directory. And that's called a forest when you have multiple domains, right? So I guess an enterprise can have multiple domains for different functions, different things like that. And it depends on what is being stored on each domain. But I can also, I'm kind of thinking of domains as kind of maybe another one of the objects that exist on an Active Directory domain, Active Directory server, right? I don't know. You IT pros can correct me on that, right? So, setting up a domain controller. So, what is a domain controller? Now we can cut back to our screen right here. What is an Active Directory domain controller? I think we got to come down here. Yep. Input. So, an Active Directory domain controller is a physical piece of hardware. It's the server by which we're controlling. It's a server by which we're controlling Active Directory, right? And you can have multiple domain controllers for redundancy. That's another. It's a very general IT concept, redundancy, right? But that's something that we learned a lot about in networking, specifically what I learned in the CCNA. We learned to have. We learned. These updates. Here we go. Don't want to update this now. But we learned that we need to have some sort of redundancy when it comes to routers, switches, and different things in the network. That way, if something goes down, we can always have a backup, right? So you can have multiple domains, right? So the first thing we want to do to be able to even identify the domain is, and bear with me, my computer is slow because I'm using a laptop, right? As I mentioned yesterday. So first thing we want to be able to do is, let me see. I'm going to change the name of the server so that we can easily identify it. Right, we see this here, right? We're going to change that. Just put Windows Server 2019, and I'm going to put 1. Also, Windows Server 2019 1. Right. See, right now it's part of a work group, which is, just I guess a local machine. Later on, probably the next video, we are going to join the Windows 10 computer to another Windows machine to the domain, and this is going to be joined to a domain as well. I mean, it's going to be part of the domain. Okay, I guess I can't use any hyphen, no symbols. So boom, we're just going to can't put a space either. See, we're learning as we're going along, right? Okay, well, we'll see what happens. It's telling me some stuff. I don't know. Let me just go ahead and do that. Restart now. It should be fairly quick, but yeah, you see, I don't know, it has these little quirks to it that I'm learning as we go along. Yeah, as you can see, we have it installed on VirtualBox. And there's also another thing that we can do to optimize the performance on this PC. I saw it on another channel. Let me see, input. Boom. See, right now we're logging into the local machine. think I gotta change the view of this. Yeah, I'm missing my taskbar. See, that's the quirky thing with VirtualBox. It's very quirky. Can we do it like this? No, we can't. I forgot how to do it, but you can see we're learning as we go along because anyway, let's move on because I don't want this video to be too long. All right, so go here, or you can search for the computer, this PC. According to Alexa Answers Contributor, politically correct. I don't know what my Alexa is talking about, but yeah, you go to PC, you go to Properties, Advanced System Settings. I believe it's performance, adjust for best performance. Something I saw on KevTech's channel. All right. Now we're gonna get to the fun stuff. So now we are going to install Active Directory, and how we do that is something that we can do is we can first, let's pin this to taskbar so that it's easily accessible. And we could go here. Can we go here too? I don't know, I'm just looking around. I just like to look around. Right, we could go here, right? Or we can go here. See, it says configure this local server, right? Now you go here. This wizard helps you install roles, role services, or features. You determine which roles, role services, or features to install based on the computing needs of your organization, such as sharing documents or hosting a website, right? So you just click next, right? And then we're gonna click on role-based or feature-based installation. Configure a single server by adding roles, role services, and features. Okay, what's remote desktop services installation? Install required roles for virtual desktop infrastructure to create a virtual machine based or session-based desktop deployment. So this is configuring a single server. Now, this is the information for the server that we're going to be using, right? The name is going to be Windows Server 2019. This is the default IP address, but that's not the IP address that we're going to be using. And it says Microsoft Windows Server 2019 standard evaluation. Now, here's the thing. This is where it could kind of get a little bit tricky, because based off of how I'm installing this and running it in my lab environment, it's going to differ from how you're doing it. Ideally, if you're doing it, you've installed VirtualBox, you've installed Windows Server 2019, and you've installed Windows 10, right? Now, the IP address that I'm going to be setting as a static IP address is the best practice. This is a best practice for networking, right? When you're installing a server and you're setting a server up, you're not gonna let DHCP dynamically allocate an IP address for the server. What you're gonna do is you're going to set aside a group of static IP addresses for your servers, which is usually the lower end of your IP address subnet, your IP address range, right? So what I'm going to do is in the next video, I'm going to assign this IP address that you see right here, an IP address that's on my home network's local subnet, right? What you're going to do is you're going to be doing the same thing, but also I'm going to go more into this. Since you're doing it in VirtualBox, you're going to have to go to your network settings. And we're going to get more into this later on, right? You're going to go to devices. You're going to go to network settings. You're not going to use NAT, right? You're going to change it to, I think it's host only adapter, right? But before you even do that, we'd have to go back to VirtualBox, and I think it's in tools, network. You need to make sure that the DHCP server is enabled in VirtualBox, right? For VirtualBox host only Ethernet adapter, you need to make sure that the DHCP server, you need to make sure this is enabled, right? That's something that I didn't have to do before. I remember when I was doing this last year, when I was installing Active Directory last year, I didn't have to do all of that, but it's requiring that we do that now, right? And ideally, and I love the networking stuff, this is why I'm going into it. What we're gonna do is, once we have that IP address set up and everything, you want to make sure that you can reach the server, right? So you're ideally gonna be pinging the server's IP address from the host, the domain host, the host that you're gonna use to join the domain controller, right? And join the domain with, right? And then once you have the IP address, of course, you're gonna have to configure this IP address as the hosts on that domain's DNS, as its DNS server, right? Because this is gonna be providing name resolution, DNS, and all this other stuff, right? So we're gonna click next. I believe that's how it goes, right? So add roles and features, boom, boom, boom. And I think, which one do we? I think it's add domain services. Don't quote me. Let me double check real quick. Don't want to make a catastrophic mistake. Let me see. I'm going to check on my Mac. Because I have some notes up. Let me see something. Yep. It's going to be Active Directory Domain Services. And then we are going to go ahead and click next. See, if you don't know something, Google is your friend. Make sure that you go on Google and you search for anything that you don't know. It's okay, because here's the thing. Here's a little rant. In IT, we have the tendency, or us new people in IT, we have the tendency to think that, you know, IT professionals are geniuses, which they are, but they don't know everything, right? We're not going to know everything. We're not expected to know everything, but we're expected to know how to find the information that we need, right? And you should study hard and know, you should have the foundations down, right? You should know how to read, you should know how to write, you should know how to learn, you should know how to Google, you should know the basic protocols, you should have your CompTIA A+ certification. That's my humble opinion. And you should know how to weed out information that's useless, right? So now let's move on. I'm gonna click add features, click next. I'm gonna click next. See, now this is giving you the definition of what Active Directory is. And that's the cool thing about doing this and, you know, learning as you go along. It explains it right here. It says Active Directory Domain Services stores information about users, computers, and other devices on the network. ADDS helps administrators securely manage this information and facilitates resource sharing and collaboration between users. That's why everybody's so excited about Active Directory. But it says to install the following role services or features on selected server, click install. And it says restart the destination server automatically if required. Yeah, I'll do that. Just click install. And it's gonna take some time to install on my machine because my machine is slow. I'm installing this. I'm doing all of this on a 4 gig, a laptop that has 4 gigs of memory of RAM, and I think about 150 gigs of storage. So yeah, you can have a limited amount of resources and still get the job done. It's just all about how much you're willing to, how much patience you have, right? And it's installing. Ideally, afterwards, it's going to restart, and yeah. So, yup. And then after this, we're pretty much gonna be. That's pretty much how you install Active Directory. After this, we got to promote it to promote this server to a domain, and then we're gonna have to put in all of that information and everything. So while this is installing, yeah, I like this format. I hope that I can. I hope that this turns into something where we can all learn together. Like, as I'm recording this, I would ideally like to have maybe YouTube up on my iPad over here. I have an iPad over here, I have a laptop here. I have double monitors, and I would hope that I can, watch the chat, take some pointers and stuff from you guys. Maybe set up something where I have no idea how to do it, and then you guys can direct me on how to do it. That'd be cool. Since everything now is virtual, we can create these little virtual groups, virtual classrooms. There's a lot of that going on already, but it's nice to have little pockets of groups where we can learn and grow together, right? That's my tag, right? Learning and growing together. Because you're forever going to be learning, you're forever going to be collaborating with people. And, if you have no experience in IT, like myself, I have no formal experience in IT, the best way to start working on getting that experience is joining Discords, doing labs, what else? Doing labs, connecting with people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I was really sleeping on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is really cool for networking with people and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm also thinking about doing like some tech news, because I read a lot about different tech things. I have newsletters and things that I'm a part of where I think would make a great great conversation content, when I'm commenting on it and stuff like that. So yep. So in the next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to go over again how to install Windows 10, right? For those of you who didn't install it already, and then we're going to join the domain, right? Look like it's done. Promote this server to a domain. Right, so we have 3 options. It says add a domain controller to an existing domain. So I already have a domain set up on this computer here on my I have a Lenovo all the way to my right. I love Lenovo. Lenovo is a solid machine, and it's I can choose to join this to that domain, but we're not going to do that. We're going to set up a fresh new system, right? And it says add a new domain to an existing forest, add a domain controller to an existing domain, add a new domain to an existing forest. Not really too sure what that entails, adding a new domain. I guess that's setting up a separate domain with resources in it. The domain controller is a machine that's going to control that Active Directory instance, I guess. And then add a new forest. We're doing something starting completely fresh, right? So this is a new forest. So the forest, from my understanding, consists of one or more domains, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So this is going to be ipvdre dot, let's put .tech, because I already have a domain on the same subnet called ipvdre.local. So I'm doing ipvdre.tech so that there's no conflicts and stuff. Even though it shouldn't be an issue, because I don't actually have, this is where the network settings come into play. I don't have this set up as a bridged adapter. So basically what a bridged adapter is, we're bridging the virtual NIC with the physical NIC on the machine, which will put the virtual machine onto the local subnet. So if I was to use bridged adapter, then it would probably conflict. If I was to use ipvdre.local, it'll probably conflict with the domain name that already exists on this subnet. Don't quote me on that. I'm just surmising that. So let's go click next. And now we'll just we're not using 2016, but we're going to leave 2016 there. Don't want to mess with any of this stuff here because force functional level, I guess this is, yeah, we'll leave that alone. So let me see here. Let me go back to my notes because I want to make sure that domain functional level you desire, and enter a password into the type, the directory service restore mode password section. So yeah, we're gonna put a password here. Click next. Click next. I think this is gonna come up on its own. Yep, ipvdre. I just randomly came up with that name one day. I thought it sounded cool. So next. Verifying prerequisites for domain controller operation. So we're gonna view the results. So we have these attention flags here. Windows Server 2019 domain controllers have a default for the security setting named allow cryptography algorithms compatible with Windows NT 4.0. Excuse me. I should have gotten some water. That prevents weaker cryptography algorithms when establishing security channel sessions. That reminds me of in the CCNA I learned that when you're setting a password on a Cisco router or switch in iOS period, there's multiple ways to set a password, but when you set a password using a clear text password on your Cisco equipment in your iOS, and then you set a secret, which is a hashed password. The secret is going to be required. It's going to pretty much override the clear text password for, like, say you're doing enable secret. You want to get to the privilege exec mode, which is also called the enable mode. If you set a clear text password and then you set a secret, which is a hashed password, it overrides that. So that kind of reminds me of that. See, everything reminds me of the CCNA, the networking. The CCNA really covers so many different topics. I don't want to say it reminds me, because all of these concepts kind of gel, kind of mesh together. So it's cool to as much as people want to say, hey, yeah, don't get a bunch of certifications and all that stuff. I mean, it kind of helps out when you have a high level view of the theory and then you putting it into practice and you're like, okay, this reminds me of something that I learned, right? It says this computer has at least one physical network adapter that does not have a static IP address assigned to its IP properties. So yeah, we're gonna do that in the next episode. It says if both IPv4 and IPv6 are enabled for a network adapter, both IPv4 and IPv6 static IP addresses should be assigned to both IPv4 and IPv6 properties of the physical network adapter. Such static IP addresses or address assignment should be done to all physical network adapters for reliable DNS operation. Of course, you want to make sure that you have static IP addresses. This is what I said before. You want to make sure that you have static IP addresses set for accessibility, right? You don't want to set a DHCP. You don't want to set a dynamically allocated IP address, or you don't want DHCP to dynamically assign an IP address to a server that needs to be accessible 24/7, right? So if you do that, this is what happens with DHCP. DHCP leases an IP address for a finite period of time. Of course, you can set DHCP to have really long lease times or indefinite lease times. I guess you could do it that way. At least I think that's what the CCNA taught me. But ideally, you want to set a static IP address that's on the same subnet as all the other devices. Don't want to mess with DHCP and all of that, because if you have a leased IP address, it's only going to be available, that IP address is only going to be available or allocated to that machine for a defined period of time. So for example, say you have your Windows server set up on a network and it uses a DHCP server. It'll get allocated an IP address like 10.8.0.16, and the lease time is 5 minutes, right? Next thing you know, after 5 minutes, you have your coworkers screaming that they can't get to the internet or they can't get some resources on the network or what have you, and lo and behold, it's because the IP address changed, right? So when you have your IP address leased for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever, it's going to either release the same IP address or it's going to get a different IP address, right? So yeah, it's highly advisable that you use a static IP address. That way it's accessible for forever, for as long as you want it to be accessible for, right? A delegation for this DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found or does not run Windows DNS server. If you're integrating with an existing DNS infrastructure, you should manually create a delegation to this DNS server in the parent zone to ensure reliable name resolution from outside the domain IPv4.tech. Otherwise, no action is required. See, there's a lot of DNS networking stuff involved in here. And to be fair, I didn't give Active Directory a fair shake because I was like, I just want to work mainly on the routers and switches and all that stuff. But actually having skills with Active Directory and being able to work with users and stuff like that is admirable. I like it. So it's installing again. I don't know what it's installing, but okay, so it's waiting for DNS installation to finish. I kind of like this format. I know I keep talking about the video production, but after this, all I need to do is, just upload this. And then you guys will have it quicker. That's why I like this whole process that I'm using. It's pretty cool. This format is pretty cool. And also, I highly advise, like, if you're new to IT like me, you could do exactly what I'm doing. You can do your homework on, so this is what I would do, or this is what I'm doing. I'm going to different job descriptions and Googling different things about how to become a network engineer, network technician, things of that nature. And I'm looking at job descriptions and I'm seeing what skills they require. And I'm just literally copy and pasting them, putting them into my notepads, and then checking off the list. As I'm learning, I learn them as I go along, right? So for instance, last weekend I was looking up how to become a NOC technician, which is Network Operations Center Technician. And I learned a lot. I learned that as a NOC technician, I pretty much know all of the basic things with regard to networking, but I have a really huge blind spot when it comes to RMM tools and also network monitoring tools. So I installed a network monitoring tool called Nagios. Some people don't like it, but I don't know. It's one of the tools that I found that were free. It's called it's Nagios 11, I believe. So I'm gonna be demonstrating how to use that too. Not really a demonstration on how to use it. You guys is gonna come along for the ride with me on how to use that, on how to figure out using it. But essentially, Nagios uses SNMP. We learned that in CCNA also, to manage the networking devices, which is cool. Nagios 11, Nagios period, it allows for us to log into these devices and to manage them, to get alerts, to find out some, I think some even give you like the temperature, the CPU usage, all of that stuff. And the whole purpose of having a network monitoring tool like Nagios is to, for incident management. Let me see. I'm gonna look it up real quick. I have it in my notes. I wrote down a whole thing. Incident management. I have a whole database of notes. Yeah, so right, so I looked up while this is installing. We could talk about how to actually get skills for a job. I looked up skills needed to work inside a NOC, right? NOC, network engineer, network technician, troubleshooting, right? Incident handling. So with Nagios, you have this network monitoring tool that essentially manages your machines. To my right here, I have like 7 Cisco devices. I got 4 Cisco routers and I got 3 Cisco switches, right? So with a software like Nagios, you're monitoring these devices, their interfaces, etc. When something goes down, like an interface goes down, that's advertising advertising networks using OSPF, right? That's a huge thing. That's huge, right? So you need to be able to manage that. You need to be able to manage that as quickly as possible, right? So that's the whole point of incident. That's the whole point of incident handling, right? You want to be able to. It's restarting. Okay. You want to be able to. I hope it didn't interrupt it. That would suck. But you want to be able to manage incidences without, having to actually go to the machine. I mean, you might need to go to the machine anyway, but you want to be able to manage those incidents as, I guess, efficiently as possible, right? So I can imagine that maybe an interface goes down and it has nothing to do with it's not a layer 1 issue. It might be something that you can resolve within the command line. You'll be able to log in and, try to resolve it from the command line. If not, of course, you're gonna have to probably go over to the building, walk over to wherever the machine is and fix it, right? Then you got documentation, which is kind of like what we're doing here. Monitoring infrastructure, that's Nagios that I just finished talking about, using network monitoring tools. What else do we have here? Tracking issues, troubleshooting, monitor systems, and yeah. So those are some things that I'm going to be working on in the next videos. I have SolarWinds here, which is a type of monitoring system, NimSoft, Nagios, which is what I was just talking about, and yeah, but that's what I like to do, and that's the whole purpose of making this type of content, because we're building skills, right? You might have looked at a job description and it says that you need to know Active Directory. Now you know Active Directory, you know how to install it. In the next video, we're probably going to be doing joining the domain and creating users and changing passwords and stuff like that. So yeah, let me write that down, because I don't want to forget. I'm not the best with planning out my content, but I'm getting better at it as we go along. Maybe your system is faster than mine, but it's taking a minute to log in. So basically, that's what we just did. We just installed, we learned about Active Directory. We learned a little bit about DNS and DHCP, the importance of the IP address configuration on here, which we're gonna go more into in the next video. Let me see. Yeah, so we learned some of those basic things, and those are things that you should be able to answer on a job interview, right? You should be able to answer, at least this is what I was asked on a technical interview. A few technical interviews I was asked, what is a DNS? What is DHCP? What is a VLAN? A VLAN is just a virtual local area network, which you can configure on a managed switch. And VLANs are important because I'm trying to think how Active Directory plays into VLANs. I guess you could put a domain on on a VLAN, but I'm thinking, can you join? Of course you can join a domain across separate VLANs. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, of course you could do that. Yeah, that makes sense. You could put a domain, and I'm just thinking about this as, you know, a networking type guy. You can put one of these Active Directory domains on, let's say, VLAN 99 or VLAN 100. Let's say you put it on VLAN 100, and then you can join the domain from different users, different machines on different VLANs, like VLAN 2, VLAN 3, VLAN 4, VLAN 5. But I'm trying to think about how you would route to the, yeah, it's simple. It's all in the IPv settings. I don't think you would have to necessarily be on the same, you wouldn't have to be on the same default, you wouldn't have to be on the same subnet as the domain controller or the server. You just have to make sure that your default gateway has a route to that DNS server, right? See, that's CCNA stuff, right? Going over some networking stuff as we install this. But that's what I love about networking, because it requires a lot of thinking, planning, things that I like to do, right? So yeah, it's taking a hot minute, but I just want to show you guys one more thing, because when we log in, it should, yep, here we go. See, now you see here, it says IPVDRE/administrator. So IPVDRE, as you know, is the domain name, and administrator is the user under that domain, right? So what we're gonna do in the next video is we're going to create an Active Directory user under the IPVDRE domain, and then we're gonna join from here, right? So we do other user, right? And then we'll ideally type in, let's say the name is PVDRE, and say we just type in, I don't know, we just talking about knock tech 1, right? Right now, that's not a user. We didn't create that user, right? But let's click right here. It says how to sign into another domain, right? So it says domain name / domain username to sign into another domain, right? That's straightforward, right? You like how we just put right here, IPVDRE / knocktech1. That might be a user account that we created under the IPVDRE domain, right? And then we have this right here to log into the local machine. We have the name of the computer, Windows Server 20. That's the name of the computer that we changed earlier. And then we put / local username. The local username, you can create that, or it's already on there, right? So logging in, and that's about it. This video is almost an hour long, but I hope it was very informative. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. But yeah, so see, we pinned the server manager to the taskbar. Server manager pops up. And that's pretty much it. Server groups 1, server totals 1. And that's how you install Active Directory. Next video, we're going to be installing Windows 10. I'm going to go over how to install Windows 10 again. Creating users, changing passwords. Of course, joining the domain, right? And that's pretty much it. So this video is already long enough as is. Again, it's probably gonna be a little bit different on my end, but I'm gonna be using my local machine, my laptop rather than a virtual machine. You're probably gonna be using a virtual machine. We're gonna go over some networking stuff as well in order to get our server onto the subnet and to have our computer join that domain, right? So that's pretty much that. That's how you join. That's how you install Active Directory. Tomorrow we're gonna be, again, like I said, doing a little bit more fun stuff. And that's pretty much it. See you guys next time.